Loyalty, No Royalty documentary of the breakup of Tony Toni Tone.
It never rains in California, but it does rain on Tony Toni Tone's parade. Well, the other Tony Toni Tones anyway. If you're confused now, don't worry. It'll all make sense later on in the video. The Tonys, TC3, Triple T, or whatever you want to call them, were amongst the most innovative groups to come popping out of the 90s. Their funk, R&B, and soulful ballads captured soul listeners from every which way and around the block, producing hits like Anniversary, Whatever You Want, Little Walter, and more. Their permanent texturized curls, along with their mature sound, surely left its mark on music forever. But after indirectly splitting up the band, dark revelations had soon spilled over. From tragic deaths to betrayals and uncut checks, these are the trials and tribulations of the 6 Tonys. What began as an innocuous joke transformed into the forever innovative R&B trio Tony Toni Tone. Formed in Oakland, California in 1988, brothers Dwayne and Charles Wiggins, along with their cousin Timothy Christian Riley, got the brilliant idea to cultivate their own group. A lover of all things music, TC3 quickly gained popularity with their unique blend of soulful vocals, smooth harmonies, and distinguishable beats. California. Dwayne and Charles Wiggins, who later take on the famous moniker Raphael Saadiq, went into this thing with a plan to be the hottest group in town. Dwayne and Raphael worked the guitar, sang lead, and played the bass. Timmy Tim, on the other hand, did his thing banging on the drums and smashing the keyboard. Surely, you'd think with a name as specific as Tony, Tony, or Tony, that the members may have thought it was best fit to name their group after them? If you thought that, then you couldn't be more wrong. Ain't no Tonys or Tonys unless we're talking about their vocal. Who and what happened to Tony? Word from Solange. Tony just so happened to be a little imaginary friend or a character, rather Dwayne Wiggins created due to his choice in clothing and overall style. You see, during his school, Dwayne was a bad mamma jamma. Your boy was fresh, suave, and gave every ounce of business realness. The S-curl stayed on deck, and his teachers would tell him he reminded them of a certain sophisticated Italian man. So why the name Tony? Tony Montana, is that you? Not exactly, but you can say hello to his little friend anyway. The Wiggins friend in this case was their immense talent. One day, while attending a wedding, the guys were set to perform. Once the MC asked for a name to introduce them to the audience, the boys were stuck. Tony, Toni, and Tone. Yeah, that'll do it. Introducing to the stage, Tony Toni Tone. Has a nice ring to it. You know what they say about icons knowing they were going to be iconic or legendary since they popped out of the oven? By age 10, Dwayne was hooked on the key strumming chords of the guitar. Singing, writing, and developing his love for music was something he'd be consistent in since grade school. The next step would be to take this thing seriously. And what better way to go about it than inviting your fam along for the journey? Signing their first major record deal with Wing Records in the late 80s. Who? Their debut album was released in '88, producing several radio hits. Little Walter flew to the top of the charts, holding the #1 spot on the R&B charts with their follow-ups like For the Love of You, Born Not to Know, and Baby Doll holding similar fates, becoming a resident in the chart's top 10. My mama told me there's a lot of things that you know. Their follow-up album, The Revival, came to fruition 2 years later and turned out to be even more of a hit than their first. The Blues and It Never Rains in Southern California were big hitters. And who could forget about Whatever You Want? Scoring their first Billboard hit was a hassle. Y'all know how Billboard can be. If it ain't light, it ain't right. But Tony Toni Tone was persistent and consistent. Feels Good had just been the track to get them to their promised land, and finally the 3 inorganic Tonys were big poppin'. Nobody could tell them Nathan. The Revival was undoubtedly a huge success, and they rode that momentum until the wheels fell off. But before they even thought about releasing another body of work, they decided to record Me and You, I Don't Know What You Come to Do, Waiting on You, and more for hood and black classics like Boys in the Hood, House Party 1 and 2, the Janet Jackson and Tupac starring film Poetic Justice, and several other tracks for movie soundtrack. Their 1993 third studio album, Son of Soul, would be their last hurrah before the group decided to depart, not permanently, in order to pursue solo endeavors. Not before dropping the goated anniversary song that will forever be a classic, Anniversary.
It is our anniversary.
While on their solo journey, Dwayne, Raphael, and Timothy all dove into songwriting and producing for other fellow entertainers and musicians. Although, yes, Dwayne and Timothy are iconic, Raphael Saadiq is truly legendary. Must I say it? A visionary among all else, Raphael was on a roll working with the best of the best, innovating brand sounds for the likes of D'Angelo, yes, How Does It Feel, and Lady D'Angelo, which Raphael produced and wrote both of those records. Tevin Campbell, A Tribe Called Quest, Original Bag Lady, Stevie Wonder, TLC, En Vogue, Mary J. Blige, Whitney Houston, Solange, John Legend, and the list goes on and on. Word to Erykah Badu, who Saadiq also produced for. As of present day, Raphael can add Beyoncé to his legendary roster, penning her recent hit Cuff It, off of her most recent album Renaissance. Talk about a lineup! After Tony Toni Tone reunited, their last studio album House of Music released in 1996, and despite only dropping 2 records, critics have cited House of Music as being the group's best work to date. Let's Get Down and Thinking of You both did exceptional on the R&B chart. We wouldn't hear about no Tonys unless they were on the front of a recognizable blue cereal box with a tiger on it for years to come, until Alicia Keys' second album, Diary of Alicia Keys, gave 2 out of 3 of TC3 their first top 10 hit in over a decade for the song Diary. Dwayne and Timothy were ecstatic, even more ecstatic after being nominated for a Grammy for the track. The year 2000 was the year Dwayne really stepped out, dropping his solo project Eyes Never Lie. We all know what Raphael was doing. Timothy decided to keep the Tony name alive, whether it was their name or not, by reeling in Amar Khalil, a childhood friend, as the new lead vocalist in 1998. Hold y'all's comments. A short group stint on Charles Raphael's end after Tony Toni Tone with some members from A Tribe Called Quest came about in the form of Lucy Pearl, which didn't last long, but nevertheless your man was booked and busy. 5 albums and counting under his belt, he later linked up with none other than actress, writer, entrepreneur, insecure president Barbie herself, Issa Rae. Working on one of the hottest shows to come out in recent years, Raphael did the dang thing on Issa's HBO hit show Insecure, working as the show's music composer. So did Tony Times 3 go on a long-term hiatus? Did they break up? Raphael insists that he himself actually never wanted to leave the group. That money will do it each and every time, won't it? Allegedly, money, executives, and trifling behavior resulted in Raphael saying adios to the other 2 Tonys. Raphael's last solo project, Jimmy Lee, was released in 2019, named after and inspired by his brother who died of a heroin overdose. Unfortunately, that wouldn't be the only sibling that have their lives cut short. Back-to-back deaths, all siblings, one after the other. His brother was unalived when Charles Raphael was only 7. Jimmy OD'd, and his other brother tragically unalived himself. In a freak accident, his sister, who was also a singer, died during a cop chase she wasn't even in. Someone else leading the police on a chase through a residential area crashed into her car. Tragedy after tragedy. What would have broken the average person, despite grieving, Raphael showed no emotions in public, or even in his music during that time. The records were being made, but that didn't mean he had to wear the grief on his sleeve. When Raphael left the group, an exec in particular tried to replace Raphael with someone from the group mint condition. Which brings us to our next segment. Did y'all know Tony Toni Tone was originally Tony Toni Tone Tone? A whole sextuplet member group. Unfortunately for the other 3 Tonys, we'd rarely get the chance to know about them. But luckily for y'all, a documentary, Loyalty, No Loyalty, The Breakup of Tony Toni Tone, was made in 2020. Told and produced by the Unknown Tonys, the documentary follows Elijah Baker, Antron Halley, and Carl Wheeler as they shed light on how the group came to be and the reality of their exit. When Raphael made the decision to create a group, he invited Elijah, Antron, and Carl into the group. It was all good in the beginning. However, after recording their first album, Elijah, Carl, and Antron noticed a lack of credit on the actual copy. They even helped on the group's second revival album. Credit was given and yet still no money. Where's the money? While Raphael and them were buying property and new whips, the other Tonys were getting paid dust. Not even lint and peppermints. Next thing they knew, they were being fired. What makes it even worse is that Elijah and Antron were relatives of the other Tonys. Carl left not wanting to know what was awaiting for him at the door. By 1996, Elijah and Carl surprisingly rejoined the group, working as behind-the-scenes contributors. The group's final album, House of Music, evidently features all 5 of the original 6 members of the cover, minus Antron, who was replaced by Jubu Smith, a guitarist and childhood friend. Then the unexpected happened. According to Elijah and them, Dwayne and Timothy replaced Raphael with Amar Khalil, who'd serve as the band's lead singer for the next 20 years after he decided to pursue solo endeavors. As of recently, Elijah, Antron, and Carl have filed a lawsuit against Tony Toni Tone, suing them for fraud and theft. Tony Toni Tone. Tony Toni Tone experienced much success throughout their career, but also faced internal conflicts that led to tumultuous changes within the group. The behind-the-scenes scheming was conniving, but you can't say they didn't leave an indelible mark on R&B and soul music. Their unique sound and unforgettable hits remain a leader in their respective categories. While it remains uncertain whether they will reunite or release new music in the future, their contributions to the genre will always be celebrated, whether as a union or independently. In the meanwhile, we'll be streaming Solange's A Seat at the Table, Beyonce's Renaissance, and whatever else Raphael put his foot in. Did you know all this was going on within Tony Toni Tone? Let us know your thoughts and opinions down below in the comments, and stay tuned for more true celebrity stories.